Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's get started with Week 22's Word Nerd Wednesday. Now, we've spent some time talking about Gandalf and Thorin, and we may not be done yet, so stay tuned tomorrow. So I thought I'd take this week's Word Nerd Wednesday and look at the many names of Gandalf and their meanings. Now, there are lots of names, and most of them are mentioned in the one passage in Book 4, Chapter 5, The Window on the West. When Faramir mentions the Grey Pilgrim coming to look at old records in Minas Tirith, that piques Frodo's interest, and he asks, "The Grey Pilgrim, had he a name?" "Oh, does he have a name?" Faramir says. "I'll give you 5 names. Mithrandir we called him in elf fashion, and he was content. Many are my names in many countries, he said. Mithrandir among the elves, Tharkun to the dwarves. Olorin I was in my youth, in the west that is forgotten. In the south, in Canus. In the north, Gandalf. To the east I go not." Let's take a look at these in the order given by my man Faramir. Other than Gandalf, Mithrandir is perhaps the most well-known of the wandering wizard's names. And I've just given you the answer right there as to what it means. Mithrandir is his Sindarin name, and it means Grey Pilgrim or Grey Wanderer. The elements are myth, which means grey, and can be found in words like Mithlond, which is Sindarin for the Grey Havens, Mithaethel, the Sindarin name for the river Horwell, and of course, Mithril. Now, the other element is Randir, Sindarin for wandering man or pilgrim, according to Parma El Delamberon 17, or just wanderer, per the rivers and beacon hills of Gondor. Then there's Tharkun. According to Unfinished Tales, both the index and the chapter on the Astari, that word means staff man in Khuzdur, but Parma El Delamberon 17's words, phrases, and passages in various tongues in The Lord of the Rings, now you know why I just call it words, phrases, and passages, says it means gray man. Now, interestingly, in a draft manuscript, the name Tharkun was spelled Sharkun. Then there's his, actual name, the name that was originally his name as a Maya in Valinor, Olorin. In the chapter The Astari in Unfinished Tales, we read that Olorin is a high elven name, and must therefore have been given to him in Valinor by the Eldar, or be a translation meant to be significant to them. In either case, what was the significance of the name, given or assumed? Olor is a word often translated dream, but that does not refer to most human dreams, certainly not the dreams of sleep. To the Eldar, it included the vivid contents of their memory, as of their imagination. It referred, in fact, to clear vision in the mind of things not physically present at the body's situation, but not only to an idea, but to a full clothing of this in particular form and detail. Now, Christopher Tolkien points out a separate etymological note that runs along the same lines, explaining that olo, or olos, means vision, fantasy, and that it is a common Elvish name for construction of the mind, not actually pre-existing in Ea, apart from the construction, but by the Eldar capable of being by art, karme, made visible and sensible. Olos is usually applied to fair constructions, having solely an artistic object, that is, not having the object of deception or of acquiring power." End quote. But then there's the name Incanus, that Gandalf says was his name in the south. Now, in that same chapter on the Astari and Unfinished Tales, Christopher Tolkien cites a note that dates from before the publication of the second edition of The Lord of the Rings in 1966, as saying, "The name Incanus is apparently alien, that is neither Westron nor Elvish, Sindarin or Quenya, nor explicable by the surviving tongues of northern men. A note in the Thane's book says that it is a form adapted to Quenya of a word in the tongue of the Haradrim, meaning simply north spy, Inca, and Noose." Okay, I can buy that. But wait, there's more. See, Christopher tells us then about a wholly different view of the etymology of this name in a note that dates to 1967. It is very unclear what was meant by in the south. Gandalf disclaimed ever visiting the east, but actually he appears to have confined his journeys and guardianship to the western lands, inhabited by elves and peoples in general hostile to Sauron. At any rate, it seems unlikely that he ever journeyed or stayed long enough in the Harad or Far Harad to have there acquired a special name in any of the alien languages of those little-known regions. The South, Tolkien says, should thus mean Gondor, at its widest, those lands under the suzerainty of Gondor at the height of its power. At the time of this tale, however, we find Gandalf always called Mithrandir in Gondor by men of rank or Númenorian origin, as Denethor, Faramir, etc. This is Sindarin, and given as the name used by the elves, but men of rank in Gondor knew and used this language. The popular name in the Westron, or common speech, was evidently one meaning grey mantle, but having been devised long before, was now in an archaic form. This is maybe represented by the Greyhame, used by Éomer in Rohan. Christopher then states that Tolkien landed on the idea that in the south referred to Gondor, and then quotes his father again, and that in Canus was, like Olorin, a Quenya name, but one devised in Gondor in earlier times, while Quenya was still much used by the learned, and was the language of many historical records, as it had been in Númenor. That is interesting stuff, but now we've run out of time and we still have names to go. So, we've had one Wizardy Word Nerd Wednesday. What about second Wizardy Word Nerd Wednesday? All right, Pip, I think we'll do that, as we take a look at Gandalf, Greyhame, Stormcrow, and Lathspell, and anything else we can find next week. But that's it for today's Word Nerd Wednesday. Come back next week as we wander the wide, wild, wonderful world of wizardy words weekly on Wednesdays. And if there's a word you want to know more about, please let me know by emailing bartleman@theprancingponypodcast.com. And please visit patreon.com/TolkienTimes to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, a monthly hangout with me, a bonus weekly episode, and a whole lot more. And finally, join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times for Third Age Thursday. If you're watching this on YouTube, please be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. If you're listening to it on a podcast app, please follow or subscribe, and follow @Tolkien Times on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.